Bismillah Rahman Rahim. We are at the final lectures of our research methodology series, and in these two lectures, which is in this and the next lecture, I'll try to summarize the important things that we have discussed in various steps and how they can make sense for us so that we can understand the whole process. I'll try to cover up the very important aspects of every single step that we have discussed and try to revise the things that can give you an idea of what we have covered, how we have covered, and why they are important to understand the whole methodology step by step. We have discussed in the beginning what is research and what is not research. So I'm starting from this point because if we can recall these things, we will be in a good position to understand the whole process. And if we are unable to recall these things, then we will definitely remain confused throughout the process of doing research. Just collecting facts or information without a purpose, with not clear purpose or with unclear purpose is not a research. Reassembling or reordering facts or information without any interpretation of these as a term to get your product or idea noticed and respected. But this is not a research. So research should be a collection of facts and information but with clear purpose. It is reassembling and reordering facts or information, but you can interpret them nicely. Because if you have an aim or purpose, then you will be in a position to interpret those facts and figures that you are organizing, reassembling or reordering. So what is research then? It is that people, scientists or researchers undertake in either to find things out in a systematic way, thereby increasing knowledge, which is taken from Zonder et al. 2009. What is systematic and what is to find out things? We have discussed these two things in detail in our earlier lectures, but here I just try to see and tell you that systematic means that research is based on logical relationships among variables, among interesting phenomena, having argumentative logic and not just beliefs. So for example, rainfall and election win can be a belief, but it is not logical. So it must be systematic, or research to be systematic, it should be logical also. So if the logical things or logical relationship flows argumentatively, it becomes systematic. And to find things out suggests multiplicity of possible purposes of research. So either you want to describe, you want to explain, you want to understand, criticize or analyze. So whatever is your purpose or the multiple of your purposes, that is how you can be in a position to find out things. Now we will try to see what is the process of research. What are the stages? So these stages are formulating and clarifying a topic, reviewing literature, designing the research, collecting data, analyzing data, writing up, and of course presenting, that we have covered in our previous lecture. So process of research starts when you start clarifying your topic. So clarifying your topic is always starting from a very simple point of broad research area, which leads you to sub-research area, which leads you to topic, and then you refine your topic. So it is finance, let's say, stock exchange, efficiency of a stock exchange, and here you actually define your full-fledged topic. So these are the steps that clarify or helps to formulate and clarify a research topic. And then we definitely talked about reviewing the literature. Then designing the research, collecting data, various ways of collecting data, analyzing the data, and writing up. We try to see these processes, these stages of research process one by one, but very briefly because we have covered lectures on these topics. So what are the attributes of a good research topic? We have already seen in our earlier lectures that a research topic must be capable and it is appropriate. What is capable? It must be feasible. Number one, on the basis of time availability. Number two, when it is finished, it must be current. Number three, financial and other resources. Number four, access to data. Number five, research skill that researchers possess. So capability argument for the attribute of a research topic must be in terms of time, resources, currentness, access, and skills of the researcher. So whether the time availability allows you to complete the research in available time or not. Will the research be current when you finish it? If you take 6 months or a year, will it remain a current and researchable and also understandable, or is it already gone astray? So you have to understand the time availability. Financial and other resources, whatever kind of research you want to conduct, do you have access to or you have finances for that? And other resources. So for example, if you need human resources or you need somebody who can analyze data for you because you don't know how to analyze the data, access to data is also very important. Whether you will be in a position to access data or not. If you are in a position, whether you can get access ethically or unethically. Ethically means that you can get access with prior permission, and you can use the data that you get for the said purpose you are getting. And finally, whether you have the required skills to analyze the data, to get to the point of your objectives of research, to answer your research question or not. So researcher must possess the research skill. Do you have necessary skills for that or not? And this is one of the important things that you have to consider before selecting and clarifying your research topic. Whether you as a researcher in a position to come up with something concrete about it or not. So your skills matter a lot. You can come up with an idea that makes sense, that is important, that is researchable, but do you have your own skills? That comes under also a constraint. If you don't have skills, whether you have finances and resources to get help of others. If you cannot have finances and resources to get others help, how you are going to answer the research question that you have in your mind? So these are the important points that you have to keep in your mind under capability or feasibility of a research topic when you are deciding or clarifying a research topic. Appropriateness is also important. Meeting institutional standards. Will the examining institute's standard be met? Institutional standards should be met. Does it researchable? It may be researchable, but your research institute does not allow it or does not accept it as according to its set standards. So you have to think it seriously. Theoretical linkages. Does the topic contain issues with clear links to theory? How the relationship that you form logically or the hypothesis that you have in your mind have some links with the existing theories that are there in that particular field of knowledge. Clarity of research questions and objectives. Are your research question and objectives are clear to you? Does it make sense when it comes to your mind? Or the research question and objective clearly stated? Are you in a position to state them in words that also make sense for those who want to read or who read them? Innovativeness and or contribution. Is it that your research topic is contributing to the existing field of knowledge, or is it innovative enough to make some sense for the readers? Will the proposed research provide fresh insight into the topic? If it is outstanding, it is innovative, it is contributing to the field of knowledge, so you go ahead. Findings must be coherent with the analysis. Whatever you analyze, whatever the analysis you use for your data, are findings coherent with that or not? Are the findings likely to be symmetrical? So these are the things that we have to understand when we are talking about the topic of our research. Attributes must have capability and appropriateness, and within capability and appropriateness we have to think about time, resources, researchers' skills, and also institutional standards and other things that can come up as hindrance or constraints while we want to conduct a research topic. Then we have also talked about refining research idea. Once you have a research topic in your mind, you see according to the attributes, and now you want to refine the research idea, and that can be done using Delphi technique. What is it? We have discussed in detail. Here I just want to summarize the steps that we take in Delphi technique. What it does, it actually involves using a group of people who are either involved or interested in the research idea to generate and choose a more specific research idea. You have a general idea, you make a group of people, you discuss with them so that you can come up with refined, appropriate research idea. That is the simple, vague understanding of Delphi technique. So to use this technique, what you need is to brief the members of the group about the research idea. This is first thing that you do. You make a group of people who are interested or working on that particular topic. You are doing research. To brief the members of the group about the research idea, this is the first thing that you do. Encourage group members to seek clarification and ask for further information if they want to. Ask each member of the group about the justification of idea. Does it make sense or not? Collect the research ideas in unedited and non-attributable form. Whatever the group member says, write them down without editing it, without giving any attributes to it, just write them down. A second cycle of the process in which comment on the research idea and revise them. So this is up till the fourth point. This is the whole process of Delphi technique. So up till this point you have Delphi technique. What you do, you make a group of people who are interested and or working on the topic of your research interest. So you combine that group, you inform them about, you give a briefing about the idea that you have in your mind, you encourage them to ask questions, clarification, information. You ask each member about the justification of the idea. Whatever they say, you write them down unedited in your ideas diary. So this is what you do in Delphi technique. The second cycle starts when you process the comments on the research idea, give it to them and revise them, and then you do subsequent cycle unless a consensus is reached. So whatever is in, you write in unedited form, you give them to each member of your group, either in email form, either in writing form, either in any of the form that is convenient for you to communicate with them. So then you can get ideas from them again and try to incorporate so that you can come up on a consensus, refined, researchable topic that gives a sense of understanding to you also. And you keep this cycle continue unless you come up with a consensus of research topic for your research. Then we have also talked about, once we are done with research topic, we talked about objectives, and within objectives we also talked about that objectives must fulfill the criteria of being SMART. And SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. 5 things must be covered within your research objectives. Specific means what precisely as a researcher you want to hope to achieve from undertaking the research. What do you want to specifically or precisely achieve? Measurable, what measures will you use to determine whether you have achieved your objectives or not? Achievable, are the targets you have set for yourself achievable given all the possible constraint? Realistic, given all other demands upon your time, will you have the time and energy to complete the research on time? Timely, will you have time to accomplish all your objectives? So you have to understand the constraints you are having, the hindrances that you are having, the resourcelessness that you are having, and you have to understand on the other hand the realisticness, the measurability, the achievability and timeliness of your objectives. So if you can match your constraints versus your potentials, then you will be in a better position to make your objectives SMART. That is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely. And in that way you are in a better position, number one, to understand what are your objectives, number two, you are in a position to measure them and achieve them, and number three, you can be in a position to measure and achieve them on timely basis. And if that is the case, then your objectives must be realistic and also specific. So this is how they become SMART objective. Why we do review of literature? Instead of focusing again how do we do, now we are trying to see why do we do review of existing literature. There are various points that come into your mind. It is maybe a preliminary search of existing material. Whatever exists you want to search. Organize valuable ideas and findings. What has already been said and done in the research related to your research work, you organize these ideas and findings. To identify other research that may be in progress. You can also identify what kind of research is still going on the topic of your research. That also helps to generate research ideas. So it helps in generating further research ideas. It also helps to further refine your research question and objectives. When you do literature review, you are in a better position to increase your focus on your research topic. When the focus increased, you become more narrowed down and focused and appropriate. What it does, it helps you to refine your research objectives and also the research question that you have set for your research. So to further refine your research question and objectives, reviewing literature is also important. It also helps to develop a critical perspective. Although you have some relationship of variables in your mind, hypotheses in your mind, but you are unable to link them theoretically. So to develop a critical perspective, if you read literature, you will be in a better position to develop your critical view about a particular research topic you are interested in. To avoid repeating work already undertaking. This is the most important aspect of reviewing literature, that when you read whatever already been done, you actually are in a position to avoid what has been done and what you should not do because it has already been carried out by one or the other researcher. So these are the important points that you have to keep in your mind when you are reviewing existing literature. So what is the process of literature review? Without going into much of the details, I just want to give you this circular flow of how to organize your literature review, how to refine your search and key terms, and how to come up with something called critical review of literature. That is our aim, that is our end product. We start with our research questions and objectives. Once we are done with our research topic and research objectives, now we are in a good position to start literature review. So our research objectives and question gives us a sense of defining parameters. Once we are in a position to define parameters, then we will be in a position to generate keywords and key terms. When we generate keywords and key terms, we try to conduct a search using any suitable database or search engine. And once we conduct search, we definitely obtain some literature that we evaluate, and after evaluation we record it. And we have discussed all these single things in details. So this is the circular process which keeps on moving and keeps on moving until we reach at a stage where we are in a position to write a critical literature review. We called it critical literature review because we try to cover as much as possible of existing literature on the related topic of research, and we try to criticize or look into it or evaluate the literature in a critical framework. Rather than just summarizing, we also present a critique of the literature that is already existing, and this is how it helps us understand the whole process, what has already been done, where was the criticism lies, where we can have some suggestions, and how we can innovate or contribute to the ongoing debate on that particular topic. So this also gives us an idea of where the gaps are and where we are producing something that is filling this or that particular gap in the research. So this is the whole process of literature review that keeps on moving until we are in a position to write a literature review which is critical and which is also evaluating the already existing evidence in a critical framework. Then we have also covered how we can read effectively, and within effective reading we have covered these four things: previewing, annotating, summarizing, comparing, and contrasting. Just read them out, what are they, and you will be in a position to understand how to read effectively the literature that you have. I'll give you some personal experiences when you read, what common mistakes a person can or potentially does, and how to avoid them. The first thing that we have to keep in our mind is that we have to read with purpose. We have to read with purpose. We have to understand why we are reading that particular paper. And when we know why we are reading that particular paper, the second thing that we have to understand is the message of the paper. What message do we learn from reading this paper? Finally, we have to see that what is our critical evaluation or assessment of that particular paper. So we have to understand it in that way. So these three things we have to keep in mind while we read each and every paper, and then what we can do, that we make a Word file where we try to see what is the issue that is covered in the paper, what are the objectives of that particular research paper or book chapter, whatever we are reading, what kind of data it used and methodology, main findings or results, not all but important, main conclusion, and finally you have to add your own criticism. So these are the 6 headings under which you have to organize the paper that you are reading. So when you are reading a paper, try to read the introduction, and within introduction you will definitely find the issue and objectives. So write the issue of the paper, what specific issue that particular paper or chapter or dissertation tries to cover, and then what are the objectives, what kind of data and methodology is used, what main results are coming up from this analysis, and what are the main conclusions. And after writing these things, you have done reading the paper, then you have to write your own critical assessment of the paper. Under these 6 headings, you can summarize the paper nicely in 1.5 2 pages. So if you can summarize it, then you don't have to go to that particular paper every time and see what has been said. But what you can do, you can just look into these 2 pages and you can understand how you read it, what was your criticism, and what are the main points of that particular paper. What you can do to organize it nicely is to give a code and number. For example, if you're talking about financial economics, then you can give it, let's say, FE number 1, and then FE number 2, FE number 3, and of course so on if you are reading 20 papers, so FE number 20. Or if you are having, let's say, human resources, then you can call it HR number 1. So you can give number to the paper so that you can understand which paper you're talking about. So this is how you can make your literature review understandable, and if you want to go back to that particular paper, you have a number of that particular paper, you can just click or open it, or you have the printout, so you can just see which number you need and what and why. This is how you can organize your literature while you are reading the papers. So previewing is looking around the text before you start reading in order to establish precisely its purpose and how it may inform you literature search. Annotating, conducting a dialogue with yourself, the author, and the issue and the ideas at stake. So these are the 3 things that I have discussed: the real purpose, the message, and summarizing is to determine that you have really got the point, is to be able to state in your own words. Outlining the arguments of the text is a version of annotating and can be done quite informally in the margins of the text. So if you are reading a paper, you can summarize important points on these margins on left side, or on these margins on right side, or you can also do it at the bottom of the page or at the top of the page. So these summaries can also help you write under these headings that I have described. Comparing and contrasting, ask yourself how your thinking has been altered by this reading, or how has it affected your response to the issue and themes of your research. This is how you will be in a better position to answer few of the questions within yourself and try to understand the reading, and you can be in a position to read the things, the papers, the chapters in the books effectively. What are the sources of literature? We have discussed in detail. Here I just want to give you an idea of, we have 3 sources of literature: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Within primary, we have reports, theses, emails, conference proceedings, government publication, and unpublished manuscripts. While in secondary, we have journals, books, and newspapers. In tertiary, we have abstracts that are published, catalogs that are there in libraries, encyclopedias, dictionaries, and bibliographies. Normally, in your graduate level research, you don't go to tertiary level sources. Sometime you need a dictionary to understand meaning of some words, or bibliographies to know what kind of research has been already done through the literature and all that. But most of the time, either you use primary source or predominantly use secondary source, that is journals, books, and to some extent newspapers. So this is how these various sources help you find what is available on the research topic that you are interested in, what is available on the research question that you want to answer, and how you can meet your objectives while accessing these primary and secondary sources. Why search strategy planning is needed? We also talked about research and search strategy, and we have talked about why search strategy planning is needed. This search strategy planning is through this circular flow of writing about critical literature review, and we have to search through search engine or databases. So if this is the case, then we have to understand why do we need search strategy planning. Because literature search is a time consuming process, Be aware of information loading or overloading, and clearly defined objectives, research questions that are necessary to have focus. To answer these three things, we have to have a search strategy. Number one, it is a time consuming process. So unless we have a strategy, we waste our time. We can have overloading of information, so to avoid information overloading, we have to have a search strategy. And to be on focus, to remain on focus, to remain within the premises of your research focus, you have to have clear objectives, research questions, so that you can remain focused. These are the three things that are necessary so that you can have a search strategy planning that is important to avoid your time consumption and overloading of information. What are the parameters of search strategy? We have already discussed. I'm talking about these simple things again because I think these are very important things. Normally when you start searching, after some time you get annoyed because you're not finding something and you forget these simple things. And when you forget these simple things, what you do, you commit something either unethical, or you try to avoid searching, or you try not to use the parameters of your search strategy. And if you do that, you actually remain unable to get something relevant to your research. What you do is to waste your time, you get overloaded with information, and you get confused. So these are the things we have to avoid. That's why we plan our search strategy. So one thing that is important, the first thing is we have to be clear about the language. Whether we want to find something in English or any other language, let's say German, Spanish, Turkish, whatever. We have to understand our subject area. For example, here I've written governance, maybe marketing, human resources, financial economics, whatever. Sector or particular focus. Where is our particular focus? Like say public auditing or cyber crime. Within governance, what we want to focus on. So we have to see about geographical focus, for example, regional, national, urban, rural, etc. Where we want to have focus on. So literature type. Refereed journals or book, that is secondary. Primary. Or tertiary. So we have to understand what are the literature type that we are looking for. And then of course the publication period, the time period. Whether we are looking for 10 years old paper, we are looking for 20 years old paper, we are looking for very recent references, or we can mix and match whatever is available on our research topic. So these are the search strategy parameters, 6 search strategy parameters that we have to keep in our mind, so that we remain focused rather than losing focus. We will also get information that is important, and we must know rather than getting information overload. So just to repeat again, language is important, subject area is important, particular focus of subject area is important, geographical focus, literature type, and publication period. So these are the things that one has to keep in mind while deciding about the parameters of search strategy. Plagiarism we have talked about. I just cover in few points that it is unethical. We have to avoid it as much as we can. It's not about stealing the write-up of somebody, but it's also about the innovative ideas that have been discussed somewhere, that you think is very outstanding, but instead of quoting or citing or referencing properly, you give it your own name to it. So it can be of following nature: stealing material from other sources, submitting material not written by you, copying material without quoting, or paraphrasing material without documentation. So if you steal and put it your own name, that's also unethical, that is also plagiarism. You submit material written by somebody else that come to you just for review, and you submit it with your own name, which is very unethical, and it is a high level of plagiarism. Copying material without quoting, you copy it from a book or a research paper, but you didn't copy it. Paraphrasing material without documentation. Copying material without quoting is Very recent example is by Fareed Zakaria, who was running a program at CNN, also the editor of the Newsweek. What he did, he wrote an article for a newspaper in US, and he took few lines or sentences from somebody else news article or newspaper article, and he didn't quoted it. He was unable to quote it, and what he find out is that he has committed a crime of plagiarism, and he has been thrown out of the television show for some days, and also he has to leave the editorial board of the very renowned, world famous magazine called Times Week. So we have to avoid plagiarism as much as we can. Paraphrasing material, if we rewrite something in our own words, the thing is, it still does not belong to us. It's just that we have used some other words or we paraphrase it. So we have to cite it, or else we are committing a crime of plagiarism. Then we also talked about the research design. What a research design need? Number 1, objectives. Number 2, data sources. Number 3, ethical issues and constraints. Number 4, valid reasons. Objectives must be concise and clear. Data sources must be specific, and there must be availability. What ethical issues can hinder or come up front of the research you are conducting, as well as what type of constraint as a researcher you can face. You have to understand these things. What are the ethical issues involved, and what are the hindrances or constraints you can face based on what are your objectives and the sources of data that you need to meet these objectives. What are the reasons for your choice of design for that particular research? Why you are using this particular research design when you are designing your research? You have to have valid reason for it. So 4 things are very important when you're talking about research design. Research objectives, the sources of data, constraints and ethical issues you're facing, and valid reasons for the choice of your research design. Once you're clear about these 4 things, you can choose your research design and you can start your research. What are the research purposes? We can classify them accordingly into 3. Either it can be exploratory, either can be explanatory, or either it can be descriptive studies or research. Exploratory research we have discussed in detail in our previous lectures, but here I just want to summarize that it's a valuable way of assessing phenomena in a new light, to ask questions. It is particularly useful to clarify understanding of a problem if unsure of precise nature of the problem. It is useful to clarify understanding of the problem. So it explores something if it is something that exists. Explanatory studies establish causal relationship between variables and may be termed explanatory because of their causal relationship. The emphasis here is on studying a situation or a problem in order to explain the relationship between the variables. It's simple, like inflation leads to corruption or vice versa. We have to understand the relationship so that we can explain it. Descriptive studies are objective of this is depicting an accurate profile of person, event or situation. This may be an extension of or a forerunner to a piece of exploratory or more often a piece of explanatory research. It can be a part of either exploratory or explanatory, and it can be a separate study. So these are the 3 classifications of research purposes: exploratory, explanatory and descriptive, that we have to keep in mind and understand. So research strategies we have discussed in detail. It can be experimental, it can be survey, ethnographic, grounded reality, case study, archival and number of others. Here I have just taken these so that we can understand what are the research strategies. So experimental studies measure the effects of manipulating one variable on other variable. So you do experimentally rather than in real life situation you control them. Survey is collection of information in a standardized format from a group of people. Either you do it interview, either you do questionnaire, observational surveys or whatever. So ethnographic is social world, the research subject inhabits and the way they interpret it. So the people who are living in that particular community, how do they interpret their community is basically ethnographic research. Grounded theory is created from data made by a series of observation. Case study is development of detailed intensive knowledge of a single or more related cases. Archival research is searching for historical records like migration between India and Pakistan, what happened in 1971 when Pakistan disintegrated, and number of other events that you want to see in historical context. We have also discussed about the hallmarks of scientific research. There are 8 hallmarks of scientific research. I'll not go into the details, but just to refresh your mind, I'll talk about purposiveness, that is the design we have already discussed, rigor, validity, whether it is valid to do that kind of research or how valid it is, testability, method of assessing or trying, you can do it or not, replicability, if somebody want to replicate your model, is it replicable or not, accuracy, how accurate it is, objectivity, whether it fulfills the objectives or not, generalizability, whatever you have conducted, can it be generalized or not, parsimony, cost cutting, is it financially binding, constrained or hindering or not. So these are the 8 things that you have to keep in your mind that makes the hallmarks of your scientific research. So these are very important to understand, and I have just discussed them in a very brief detail so that you can refresh your mind and see the lecture where we have discussed these things in detail. Here we just want to show you, I just want to show you the theoretical framework or the hypothesis development, and we know from this that we started from observation of broad area. Once we observe a broad area, what we do, we preliminary gather the data. After gathering the preliminary data, we see about the problem definition that we have in our mind, and once we look at the problem definition, then we will be in a position to talk about the theoretical framework. We will discuss in next 1 or 2 slides what is theoretical framework, how important it is and all, and then after theoretical framework we will be in a position to generate the hypothesis. After generating hypothesis, we will try to do scientific research design that we have already discussed, and after scientific research design we do data collection, analysis and interpretation. After interpretation we do deduce or deduction hypothesis. Deducing hypothesis means either accepting it or rejecting it based on our own hypothetical relationship. Then we start report writing, presenting, and we get managerial decision on it. So this is how the whole process of research moves from starting a broad area of observation to writing a report and getting the final decision about your report. Why do we need and what is theoretical framework? It's basics of entire research. Whatever research you do, unless it is theoretically binded, have theoretical base, it is the entire research that makes basis on theoretical framework. Helps in building and identifying logical sense of the relationship. If it is a relationship between 2 variables, what is the logic behind it? Among the several factors that are important to the problem. Integrating logical beliefs with published research. You have to integrate whatever already been said by the research that is done on that particular issue and how you are linking your variables in that particular context. Helps in developing scientific basis for investigating the research problem. It is also helpful to develop scientific basis and also testing certain relationship to improve our understanding. If theory exists, we try to link it with the existing situation and we try to improve our understanding of that particular phenomena that is already existing. Testable hypothesis can be developed. Based on theoretical linkages, we will develop some hypothesis that we can test. First, we have to identify problem and then identify the variables that contribute to it. Then we do a literature survey, provide solid foundation for developing a theoretical or conceptual framework, and then we try to see theoretical framework that elaborates the relationship among variables explain the theory underlying these relationships, and describe the nature and direction of these relationships. So this is how theoretical framework helps us not only identifying problem, but the links between variables and how logically or theoretically they can be described. It also helps in clarifying, identifying and labeling the variables of the study. It also helps to important relationship among variables that must be defined, and it gives us clear explanation of the existing relationship of different variables. So this is why we need theoretical framework. We have also discussed about variables. What are the variables? These are changeable values of anything. For example, exam score. They might be this time different than the next time or from the previous time. So variables can be dependent, independent, moderate or intervening. We will just see what are dependent, moderating and so independent variable is variable which influences the dependent variable. Moderating variable is variable which modifies the original relationship between independent and dependent variable. Intervening variable is the impact on dependent variable caused by the independent variable influences in the same way. So this is how we distinguish between dependent, independent, moderating and intervening variable. We have also talked about what is a research proposal, what is the purpose of research proposal, what are its elements. Here I just want to describe the purpose must answer these 4 questions. What determine the researchers what to do? Determine what the researchers want to do. What the research is, why the research is important, convincing and worth undertaking. How the research wish to undertake it, how the researcher wish to undertake it, and what benefit will result from the effort or attempt. So we have to determine, answer these 4 questions as purpose of our research proposal. If we are in a position to answer these 4 questions, then we are fulfilling the purpose of our research proposal and we can move further. Elements of research proposal or paper or dissertation should be introduction to the area and the question that you have in your mind, study objective or objectives, proposed research design, here also maybe question or questions, proposed research design, setting of the study, instruments planned to be used, a sample design and sample size that we will discuss later, outline the proposed chapter for the dissertation, studies, problem, limitation and futures area of research, and a proposed time frame. We have discussed all these things in details. Here I just want to tell you that these are the elements that are important while you are planning to write a research proposal or a research paper, and you have to keep these things in your mind. Unless you don't keep these things in your mind, you get confused, you miss some important part, and then you'll be unable to explain your readers or audience about your research. What is a research philosophy? We have covered it in detail. Here I just want to give you an idea, that is, it is development of knowledge and the nature of that knowledge. How do we develop knowledge and what is the nature of that particular knowledge? What are the aspects of research philosophy? It can be positivism, realism, interpretivism, axiology. I'll not go into the detail because we have discussed it and it is not that important at this moment of your research career that you have to go into these details, but you have to understand these basic terms, what is it and how it is working in research methodology and research philosophy arena. If you understand it, I think you have fulfilled the purpose. What are the characteristics of deduction? We have to see, we have also discussed about deduction and induction, and we have to understand what are these two, how do they differ and why they are important. Deduction approach helps in explaining causal relationship between variables. It establishes controls for testing hypothesis. Independence of researcher is there when the researcher does the deductive research. Concepts operationalized for quantitative measurements, and it is easy to generalize deductive researches. While inductive, it is the process of building theory. You are in a process of building a new theory. So it is understanding the way humans build their own world, permitting alternative explanation of what's going on, being concerned with the context of events, using more qualitative data, using a variety of data collection methods. Deductive and inductive approaches, how do we compare them? It emphasizes on scientific principle. Theory to data, we move from theory to data. Explain causal relationship, collecting of quantitative data. We have a structured approach in deductive reasoning, and independence of researcher, what is being researched. While in inductive, we understand and gaining the meanings of human attached to events, close understanding of the context of the research, collection of qualitative data, while in deduction we have quantitative data. More flexible structure to permit changes of research emphasis during the research process, while that is not possible in deductive. Less concerned with the need to generalize. Deductive approach is generalizable. Realization that researcher is part of the research process, while there you can conduct quantitative analysis, so you might not be part of the research. So here in tabular format or graphical format, I have described it, deductive and inductive reasoning. The upper block is talking about deductive reasoning, and the lower block is talking about inductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning starts from a developed theory where we formulate hypotheses, we collect data and analyze it, and then we accept or reject the hypothesis. While inductive reasoning starts from observing a phenomena, analyzing patterns and themes, formulate relationship, and then we try to develop a new theory. So this is how deductive and inductive reasoning are different from each other. So what research approach can we choose? What determines our choice of research approach? It is described by Easterby, Smith et al. In 2008. The choice of research approach helps in number 1, making more informed decision about the research design. Number 2, thinking which research strategies will work for the topic of research. And number 3, adapting the research design to cater for any constraints. So this is how it is important to know whether our research is a theory building process or we already have a theoretical link in our mind and we are describing it through using the data, and we will be in a position to get answer to these 3 things. Then we have also covered about sampling. We have talked about senses, we have talked about sampling, the difference between that, and now we'll just want to see sampling is a valid to a census because entire population survey might be impracticable. It might be constrained to restrict data collection because of budget and time constraint, and the researcher need results or data collection quickly. That's why we need sampling rather than census. What is a sampling frame? For any probability sample, it is a complete list of all the cases or elements in the population for which your sample will be drawn. So if this is the whole population, for any particular thing we want to research on, and if we select this become our sample, while this is total population, and individual unit is case or element. So this is how we have to understand that the whole of case and element is called population, selection of it is called sample, individual is known as case or element. We have discussed in detail about sampling techniques, and within sampling techniques we have talked about probability and non-probability sampling. Within probability sampling we have talked about simple random, systematic, stratified, cluster, multi-stage, while in non-probability sampling we have talked about quota, snowball, convenience, self-selection, purposive, extreme case, heterogeneous, homogeneous, critical or typical case. And we have seen the various features of each and every probability sampling. The only difference between using a probability sampling and non-probability sampling is that within probability sampling you know the population and you can draw from the population the sample based on scientific reasons. While within non-probability sampling, because you don't know your sampling frame, your population is unknown, so your choice of sampling size is also non-scientific. So if this is the case, you normally don't use these kind of techniques for your dissertation or scientific data collection. That is why probability sampling is more prominent in scientific data collection, and that's why it is weighted highly, because you know your population, and within population you know your sample size and all, and you do it on scientific basis. That is the basic differences that you have between probability and non-probability sampling. So probability sampling is basically the chance or probability of each case being selected from the population, which is also known and also equal to all the cases or elements. That it is possible to answer research question and to achieve objectives that require you to estimate statistically the characteristics of the population from the sample. So because you are choosing population based sample and sample is representative of population, so you can also generalize your scientific investigation based on your research for the whole population also. Consequently, probability sampling is often associated with survey and experimental research strategies we have already discussed. The probability sampling is a 4-stage. 1, you identify sampling frame from your research objectives. 2, you decide on suitable sample size. Sampling frame is basically knowing what is the total population that you can have. For example, if you want to cover the rural poverty in one of the districts, then you know how much is the rural population, and you might also know how much of them are living in rural areas of Pakistan or that particular district of Pakistan. And if that is the case, then you decide about a suitable sample size. Select the appropriate technique and the sample, check whether the sample is representative or not. This is how we use 4-stage process to do probability sampling. Non-probability samples are the probability of each case being selected from the total population is not known, because we are unknown about the total population. It is impossible to answer research question or to address research objective that require you to make statistical inferences about the characteristics of population, because you don't know the population. Your sample size is not representative of that population, so statistically you cannot make strong inferences based on your non-probability samples. You may still be able to generalize from non-probability sampling about the population, but not on a statistical grounds. So this is one of the differences between probability and non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling techniques include quota sampling, purposive, snowball, and all that. And we have also discussed about secondary data analysis. What is secondary data and how do we do analysis of secondary data? We have discussed about secondary data, and we know that secondary data can be documentary, multiple source, or survey. So within documentary we have written and non-written. Within multiple source we have area-based time series. Within survey we have census, continuous and regular, and ad hoc surveys. And we have examples of each under various headings. So what kind of secondary data we can have, how and in which format we can get it, and how do we analyze it. We have discussed it in details in our various lectures. And then we also talked about how to collect primary data. Either it can be observation, either it can be interview, or either it can be through questionnaires. Here we are talking about observation, a way of data collection or a method of data collection. And what is an observation? It is the systematic observation, recording, description, analysis, and interpretation of people's behavior. Observation involves the systematic recording, description, analysis, and interpretation of people's behavior. If we can do it systematically, we called it observational data. And types of observation can be participant and structured observation. Participant observation emphasizes the discovery of meaning attached to the action, so it is qualitative in nature, while structured observation is concerned with frequency of action, how frequent that action is, so it is quantitative in nature. Then we have also discussed about interviews. An interview is a purposeful discussion between two or more people. We have already know about it. Types of interview can be semi-structured, structured, in-depth and group interviews, and we can have various forms of interviews. Interviews can be standardized and non-standardized. Here. And within standardized we have interviewer administered questionnaires. We have non-standardized one-to-one, one-to-many. Within one-to-one we have face-to-face, telephonic, internet. One-to-many we have group, internet and internet mediated focus groups, and we can also have focus group in internet and intranet mediated electronic group interviews. So this is how we determine the forms of various interviews. Types of interviews, we know it can be structured. If you use questionnaire based on a predetermined and standardized or identical set of questions, and we refer to them as interviewer administered questionnaires. Semi-structured is the questionnaire in which the researcher will have a list of themes and questions to be covered, although these may vary from interview to interview. This means that you may omit some question in particular interviews given a specific organizational context that is encountered in relation to this research topic. The order of the question in a semi-structured questionnaire is varied depending on the flow of the conversation. You can change the order, while in structured interviews the order is fixed or prefixed. On the other hand, additional questions may be required to explore your research question and objectives given the nature of the events within particular organization. While unstructured interviews are informal, use these to explore in depth a journal area in which you are interested or researcher is interested, therefore refers to these in-depth interviews. We can also call them in-depth interviews. There is no predetermined list of questions to work through. In this situation, although you need, or as a researcher need, to have a clear idea about the aspect or aspects that researcher want to explore. The interview is given the opportunity to talk freely, frequently about events, behavior and beliefs in relationship to the topic. Here I would like to stop the first part of our reviewing, summarizing the various steps of our research methodology course that we have covered in almost 30 lectures of our lecture series. We have seen that how step by step, within each step, what are the important things and how we move from one step to another, linking every step so that we don't lose systematic rigor and reliable scientific way of conducting our research, so that we can ensure validity and reliability of our research process. It is interpretable, it is repeatable, and it is generalizable in the sense that anyone can easily follow it. So this is how one step is linked to another, and within steps we have certain important issues and aspects that we have to cover so that our process becomes systematically, scientifically rigorous, valid and reliable. And if we ensure systematic scientific rigor in our research process, we are ensuring quality of research also. So this is the important things that we have to cover. In our next lecture, we'll try to see from here to further that what are the important things that we have covered. We have to refresh our mind and we have to keep in our mind when we starting a research process and how important they are. I thank you very much. I stop it here and I say you Allah Hafiz.